The file that travels with Lyudmila Pavlichenko says she has killed 309 men, and the first question American reporters ask her is whether Soviet women are allowed to wear makeup at the front. It is September 1942 in Washington. The woman at the microphones is 26 years old, a university history student on leave from an army that is losing. The second question is about how she bathes at the front. She answers politely because she's been sent 9,000 miles to be polite. Nobody in that room is entirely sure she is real, and the number is the problem. 309 is either one of the most extraordinary combat records of the Second World War, or it is a story the Soviet Union needed America to believe. This film is about which one it is. One thing first, because everything that follows depends on it. 309 is not a body count. It is an official credit, logged under a Red Army system in which a kill counted when a spotter, an officer, or the men in the next trench were willing to put their names to it. Snipers often worked alone, beyond anyone's confirmation, so the real figure could be higher. The paperwork also passed through a wartime propaganda bureau that knew exactly what a number like that was worth, so it could be lower. The honest phrase, the one this film will keep using, is credited with. Hold on to it. It does not make her smaller. It makes the question sharper. Who is the person underneath the number? The person underneath the number was born in the summer of 1916 in Bila Tserkva, a town south of Kiev, the daughter of a locksmith from Petrograd and a schoolteacher who taught her English. The family moved to Kiev when she was 14. She went to work grinding metal in the Arsenal factory, one more girl in a city of machines. Still in her mid-teens, she was pregnant. The father was a young man named Alexei Pavlichenko, and the marriage dissolved almost as fast as it had begun. He left her a son, Rostislav, and a surname, and nothing else. Her parents helped raise the boy while she went back to work. Then, in her late teens, she walked into one of the state shooting clubs that the Soviet Union ran in every industrial city, training a generation of factory workers to handle rifles between shifts. She turned out to be good, not enthusiastic. Good. She earned a marksman's badge, then a certificate from a civilian sniper course, and filed both away. In 1937, she enrolled at Kyiv University to study history. She ran sprints. She vaulted. She was writing a thesis about a 17th century Ukrainian hetman when Germany invaded the Soviet Union. She was 24, in Odessa, in June of 1941. At the recruiting office, the officer looks at the young woman across the desk and offers her what the army offers women. He suggests she could serve as a nurse. She refuses and lays her range certificates on the table instead. The army that had spent a decade training its daughters to shoot did not quite believe that one of them meant it. That was the first time. Remember the disbelief. It follows her through this entire story, and it never once slowed her down. She was posted to the 25th Rifle Division, a unit that carried the name of the Civil War hero Chapayev, a name every Soviet citizen knew from the movies. There was no rifle for her at first. She dug trenches near Odessa with a single hand grenade to her name, and by her account she finally received a Mosin Nagant from a wounded comrade who no longer needed it. In August, near a village called Belyayevka, a sector commander decided to test the history student. He points out two Romanian soldiers working in the open near the enemy line, about 400 meters out. She fires twice. Both men fall. That is how she told it, decades later, and it is fair to say out loud that there is no independent record of that day. There rarely is, with snipers, and by that same account, the strangest detail, those two dead men did not count. The army, she said, called them trial shots, and her official ledger opened at 0 after 2 kills. From its very first line, the number was never quite the whole truth. Odessa held out for 73 days. a Romanian and German siege grinding against a city with its back to the Black Sea. Somewhere in those weeks, the history student became something the division talked about. By the end of August, the credit stood at 100. By the time Odessa fell in the middle of October, it stood at 187. Understand what that number claims. On paper, it means 187 separate occasions on which someone else watched a man drop through a scope or counted a body in recaptured ground and signed a piece of paper. It also means a young woman lying motionless for hours in shell-torn ground, learning the discipline that keeps snipers alive, which is patience, and the discipline that gets them killed, which is any mistake at all. She took a shell splinter across the scalp in October. When the army evacuated Odessa by sea, she went with it to the fortress city the Soviet Union could not afford to lose, Sevastopol. Sevastopol was under siege for 250 days, and this is where the legend was manufactured, in both senses of the word. She hunted through the ravines and gun lines of the perimeter, and she trained other snipers, dozens of them, because by now the number beside her name had made her a curriculum. The most feared work was the duel. Among her 309 credited kills are 36 enemy snipers, men whose entire job was to find her first. She described the worst of them as a hunt that lasted 3 days, both shooters motionless, neither sleeping. It was a hunt to the death, she said. One of the tensest experiences of my life. Finally, he made one move too many. That is her account, and it deserves both halves of that sentence. Because there is a second famous duel story, told and retold for 80 years, in which a patrol recovers her dead opponent's logbook and finds more than 400 kills recorded in it. Running back to Dunkirk, a Ukrainian archival historian named Oleg Kaminsky went looking for that German sniper. He does not appear in German records. Kaminsky argues he never existed. Another researcher, Lyuba Vinogradova, went through the memoirs line by line and found dates that disagree with the archives, with the calendar, and occasionally with each other. And on the other side of the scale, people who knew the family point out that the service was real, the wounds were real, and that her published accounts were doctored by the same military censors who doctored everything. By one account from inside a Soviet military family, the rumor that she was pure invention started inside the Soviet army itself. A real sniper went to a real war and killed a great many men, and then a state that needed heroes faster than it could document them wrote the movie version over her life while she was still living it. Inside that manufactured legend, there was one thing nobody invented. His name was Alexei Kitsenko, a junior lieutenant and fellow sniper. She called him Lyonya. They worked as a pair at Sevastopol, and at the end of the winter, they filed a formal request with their command for permission to marry. The war outran the paperwork. In early March of 1942, a mortar barrage caught their position. By one account, he was hit shielding her with his own body. He died of his wounds in a field hospital a few days later, and by her account, she sat with him at the end. The men in her sector said she came back changed, and you can read the change straight off the ledger. She swore she would pass 300. The number stopped being arithmetic and became grief with a scope on it. By May, the Southern Army Council formally cited her for 257 credited kills. In June, as the final German assault broke over Sevastopol, mortar shrapnel tore into her face. It was, by her own count, her fourth wound. And then Moscow did something cold and clear-eyed. It ordered her out. A dead sniper is worth one line in a report. A living one, 25 years old, with a face the newspapers could love and a number the world would have to reckon with, might be worth divisions. She was taken out of the dying city at night, by submarine, one of the few who got out at all. Weeks later, Sevastopol fell, and roughly 118,000 Soviet soldiers were killed, wounded, or marched into captivity in the collapse. Her division, the Chapayev Division, effectively ceased to exist. Almost every man who had signed a line in her ledger was dead or in a prison camp. Her credit froze at 309, and it will stay there forever, because the war she was pulled out of was about to hand her a different weapon. They put the sniper on an airplane. Moscow, Tehran, Cairo, across Africa, across the Atlantic by way of Brazil, a relay flight around half the planet, because the direct routes belonged to the enemy. President Roosevelt had invited an international assembly of students to Washington, and the Kremlin sent 3 young delegates, 2 of them snipers, and Pavlichenko the only woman. A Soviet news bulletin dated the 30th of August 1942 records what happened when they landed. They were received at the White House on the day of their arrival. Eleanor Roosevelt gave them breakfast. She remembered the president asking what fighting she had seen and what her decorations were for, and the delegation slept that night as guests of the White House itself. Later retellings crowned her the first Soviet citizen ever received there. She was not. Foreign Minister Molotov had stayed at the White House 3 months earlier, and there is newsreel film of his visit to prove it. You are watching some of it now. But she was something the retellings undersold. She was the first Soviet servicewoman the White House had ever received. Not a diplomat. A line soldier of an ally most Americans knew only as a headline. Eating breakfast under the portraits of presidents, with a scar across the bridge of her nose from the fourth wound, and a war behind her eyes. Then America met her and asked about cosmetics. The New York Times introduced the girl sniper and noted, apparently for the record, that she wore no lip rouge or makeup of any kind, and that she attacked her 5-course New England breakfast with appetite. A Washington Post columnist, Malvina Lindsay, wondered in print whether an efficient warrior shouldn't take more pride in her appearance. At a press conference, a reporter asked whether Soviet women were permitted makeup at the front. She answered that there is no rule against it, but there is not always time, because you need to be able to reach for a rifle. One reporter, by her account, complained that her uniform skirt was too long and made her look fat. In a country that was losing more than 10,000 soldiers a day that summer, the question did not translate. It was the recruiting desk in Odessa all over again. Her answer to the magazine that pressed her about the uniform is one of the few quotes from the tour that appears the same in every version. "I wear my uniform with honor. It has the Order of Lenin on it. It has been covered with blood in battle." Eleanor Roosevelt watched the circus and made a decision that changed the tour. She took the sniper across the country herself. The 2 women traveled together for weeks, and something entirely unscripted happened along the way. They became friends, genuinely. The First Lady of a capitalist democracy and a Red Army lieutenant with 309 credits. And the friendship would outlive the alliance, the war, and very nearly both of them. The tour hardened her. Early on, she gave careful, wooden answers. By the time the delegation reached Chicago, she had stopped being careful. Standing before an enormous crowd, she is supposed to have said this: "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old, and I have killed 309 fascist occupants by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The crowd roared. The most famous sentence of her life needs the same honesty as her kill count. No transcript of that afternoon has ever surfaced. The wording shifts depending on who is remembering it. Occupants in one version, invaders in another. And she was 26 when she is supposed to have said 25. Her own article, published that same October, gives her age as 26. The line comes down to us polished by the same machinery that polished the number. Here is what is documented. The crowd stopped laughing at her. A folk singer named Woody Guthrie heard the story that year and wrote her a song, singing that 300 Nazis had fallen to her gun. The girl the recruiter tried to make a nurse now had the president's wife at her side, and an American folk song written in her honor. She went on to Canada, where thousands met the train in Toronto, and to Britain, where the factory workers have bombed out Coventry, a city that knew something about German fire, presented her with more than £4,500 they had raised for Red Army medical equipment, and walked her through the ruins of their cathedral. Asked in England how a woman could reconcile killing with womanhood, she reportedly answered that it is in the nature of women not only to give life, but to protect it. Then she flew home to a country still fighting for its existence. The Soviet Union never sent her back to the front line. The symbol had become too valuable to risk on a battlefield. She spent the rest of the war as a sniper instructor, and in October of 1943, she was named a hero of the Soviet Union, the only female sniper of the war who lived to receive it. The others were honored posthumously. When the war ended, she went back to Kyiv University and finished the history degree the invasion had interrupted, then spent 8 years as a researcher on the Soviet Navy's historical staff. The woman the world knew for producing bodies spent her 30s producing footnotes. She retired a major, and the war followed her home the way it followed every sniper home. The decades after brought Veterans Committee work and public appearances, and also depression, heavy drinking, and what her own century did not yet have the vocabulary to call post-traumatic stress. She died of a stroke in Moscow in October of 1974, at 58. Her son, Rostislav, was buried beside her when his time came. But the story does not end in Moscow in 1974. It ends in Moscow in 1957. Eleanor Roosevelt, by then an old woman touring the Soviet Union at the coldest point of the Cold War, insisted, against every objection her minders could produce, on one particular stop: a 2-room apartment in Moscow. Inside it, the two women performed the stiff, monitored small talk the Cold War requires, a Soviet official watching from the doorway. And then Pavlichenko makes an excuse, pulls her guest into the bedroom, and shuts the door. Out of the minder's sight, she throws her arms around Eleanor Roosevelt, half laughing, half crying, telling her how happy she is to see her. For one unwatched minute, there is no ledger and no propaganda bureau on either side of the ocean. Just two old friends who once crossed America together in wartime, holding on to each other in a small room. This film has shown you the whole ledger, the trial shots that never counted, the logbook opponent who may never have existed, the famous sentence with no transcript. Somewhere underneath all of it, there was a 24-year-old history student who went to a war her country was losing, was handed a dead man's rifle, and did something in it that 2 armies and 1 skeptical superpower found impossible to believe. The file says 309, credited. The record says something harder to dispute. Disbelief kept walking up to her, in an office in Odessa, in a ballroom in Washington, in the archives after she was gone. And every single time, it was disbelief that surrendered first. This has been Nick's World War II archive. There is another one on your screen now. The Finnish farmer credited with more than 500 kills in a single winter, without a telescopic sight, and the story of what it finally took to stop him. If you want the war's most extraordinary records told with the receipts shown, subscribe. There are more of the war's deadliest marksmen here, each one documented, not mythologized.